17. We always talk about Proverbs as the book of wisdom. Really, it's the book of wisdom. Better is a dry morsel and quietness therewith than an house full of sacrifices and strife. A wise servant have rule over a son that causeth shame, and shall have part of the inheritance among the brethren. Verse 3. The finding pot is for silver, and the furnace for gold, but the Lord trieth the heart. Verse 6. Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children are their fathers. Verse 10. A reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. 16. Wherefore is there a prize in the hand of a fool to get wisdom, seeing he hath no heart to it? Verse 17. A friend loveth all at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. 21. He that begetteth a fool doth it to his sorrow, and the father of a fool hath no joy. 22. A merry heart doth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. 23. A wicked man taketh a gift out of the bosom to pervert the ways of judgment. 28. Even a fool, when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lip is esteemed a man of understanding. Now, let me try to explain why I highlighted these areas of the scripture in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 1. Better is a dry morsel and a quietness therewith than a house full of sacrifices with truth. This verse is very similar in a thought to Proverbs chapter 15 verse 17, which reads, better is a dinner of herbs well nourished than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. The last part of the verse pictures a scene of religious activity, but activity does not always denote the working of God. A church can have a lot of meetings, a lot of organizations, and tremendous amount of activities, but all of these may cause a great deal of confusion and frustration. I think of Elijah in the court of Ahab and Jezebel. There certainly was plenty of activities going on in Ahab's palace, including a lot of religious practices, but nothing really pertaining to God. Elijah stepped in and proclaimed that it wasn't going to rain until God said so. And he wasn't in the mood to say so. Then Elijah walked out. Where did he go? He went far off to the brook of Cherith, where he stayed a long time alone with God. God was training him out of quietness of the desert. Better is a dry morsel and a quiet therewith. God took Moses out of the palace of Pharaoh, another scene of great activity and religious organizations, and put him in the desert of Midian and taught him there. Both Moses and Elijah had a dry morsel and quietness therewith. It is nice to get off a time and be by yourself. It is always good for someone to have a program inculcated in his activities that there should be a time lonely with God. The lone time with God is always dry time. There is nobody even suggesting or somebody making a little kind of noise. The lone time is a time that if you are not careful, you will sleep, because there is nothing profitable over there. But that is the place of power and greatness. Many that have risen to become men of God and great people of God, look at their standard. We spend time buying books to read so we can get some kind of understanding into certain parts of knowledge. But we never even spend time looking into the success of great men of God, and therefore you will learn something out of. Tell me your secret. What makes you to do what you do? I admire what's going on in your life. Tell me, so that this will be a teaching and a turning point. We look unto the people, look unto and smile, and then we go off. Better to be, the Bible said that better is a dry morsel. So that if you get into the strides of God, when you are in alone with God, it is the PowerPoint that you come out for. But I tell you, in most places, this is not the place that a lot of people will go. But if we learn the lesson, God have to put you into dryness. He will take you and isolate you and put you into through so that he can teach you great things. All the men of God that have ever followed their heart. Paul has to go through the desert of Arabia, and he put him there for 2 years, and he prepared him for a great onslaught. Every man that God wanted to use, he put him into isolation. But what will it be like you volunteer yourself? I want to have one-on-one with God. I don't want to do it on my spare time. I want to put it in my prime times. I know that getting up early in the morning, I do what? I have an exercise to do for 30 minutes or 1 hour. Then I take my shower. Then I just prepare myself. I prepare towards work. When should I leave home? When should I get to work? How many hours am I going to work? When do I have to come home? What do I have to do after? You see, all these things are the itinerary for the day. But you will barely look into the itinerary of a believer, a brother, or someone on this life to find out alone with God. This is where the problem is. But we think that where the noise is, where all things are being said, that's where we gain our understanding. No, it is one-on-one with God. So God is saying to you that it is better is a dry morsel and a quietness. God wants one-on-one with you. Do you want him firstly to come and pick you and put you into isolation? You will cry and you will not even have understanding. Men that God wanted to use, he all chose them and put them into isolation for our sample, that we might learn something out of quietness. So all what I'm just teaching in this morning, in this first verse, is to govern your mind that there is something called quiet time. And that is what we call alone with God. And that is the treasure that brings up the devotion heart of a servant. When you begin to have a quiet time with God, sometimes you don't just picture it about 5 hours or 3 hours. Some people spend a lot of time with the Lord. It depends upon your relationship. But if you begin, and you begin even with 5 minutes, you begin with 10 minutes, you begin with 1 hour, you will see yourself by the end of the year, you are going more than 2 or 3 hours alone with God. Let it be alone with God. You say, what am I going to do there? You do nothing. Because the place is dry. You just said, Daddy, God, I've come before your presence, and this is all what I want to devote myself to. Here is the place of power. Here is the place of understanding. I'm governing myself and reading the scripture. God, is there anything that you want me to function in this morning? So you put all these questions onto, and there will be dryness. God will never answer you. He will choose to, but he will pattern your life and mold your life onto the patterns of what he wants to steer you up. God has his will. And because you are putting yourself into, he will mold you to the fashion of how you want to. So you say that it's better to keep alone time. God wanted to put you into isolation. Are you prepared to take this isolation? And most time, we think about running to the church, running to this place. There is an organization here. There is this thing here. All is good, but I tell you, there is no quality time that can't be compared with the quality with alone with God. So let everyone on this line learn something about being alone with God. Being alone with God could be not your relaxing time, not is in out of when I get any time that I wanted. No, put it in your prime time so that you would know exactly. I know that I have to be at work at 7 o'clock. And therefore, if at a point I am just not at 7 o'clock, I am getting late. What do? You speed up. You do whatever that you're doing because your conscience has been trained to do work at that point. That's how you start up with alone with God. Let's move to verse number 2. It says, a wise servant shall have rule over a son that causeth shame, and shall have part of the inheritance among the brethren. You remember there is a scenario when God wanted to bless Abraham so much. Abraham said to God, I don't have anyone than Eliezer. He's the only servant that I have. Are you saying that the inheritance will go on to all these? Abraham had preferred to have a child that will inherit all these that God was praising on him. But look at David and Absalom. Absalom had a son, but David had a son, Absalom. But Absalom was a headache and a heartbroken to the father. So it would have been better to have a servant who is wise, that you can include that servant in your inheritance, than to give to a son who is a wayward and a vagabond. This is what God is saying. He said, a wise servant shall have rule over a son that causeth shame, and shall have part of the inheritance among the brethren. That's what you have to always think about. That not because the child didn't come out from your loins, but the kind of wisdom. It is better to leave a legacy and give him an inheritance than to look for a son who is foolish in every way, so that the servant will rather help that son of yours who is not becoming productive. Verse 3, a fining pot is for silver, and a furnace for gold, but the Lord trieth the hearts. What does it mean? It means that everything has its way of purifying it. When it called silver, silver must be in a fining pot. What does it do? When you put the silver in the fining pot, you put a lot of fire under it, so that the dross that comes on the silver could be easily be raked out and be taken out. The more the fire goes in, then the dross comes up, so you can be easily flip it, almost like blowing air on it for these flakes to go out. The dross will be taken out. Out of that comes out the silver. But gold must go into furnace for it to be purified. What does it mean? That they say the Lord trieth their heart. Why would God bring gold and silver? He's saying that human being is more precious than gold, than rubies. Therefore, you don't have to be disappointed when you are going through trials. God have to put a fire under you in order for you to be refined and become a good product. There is no child of God that will get everything on silver platter. You have to go through the strain, go through the constraints, that in the very end, the purification is going to come. I was talking to a sister. I said, Pastor, I don't know how I'm going to do with this, my business. I said, what do you think? He said, well, I'm just breaking down, because if I look into my finances, it's going down every day and there is nothing that is replacing. These are the trial times. God wanted to see whether your heart follows him. And therefore, every decision of that person must be based upon God. You don't drift out onto, because there are sometimes we do by our instinct and what we think that this is what I feel I can do. Feeling is not what built up a business. It is about the reliance on God. God put us into a kind of a catapult, a kind of a place that it becomes almost compelling, that you know that nothing is working. He only wants to bring your mind back to do what? To know that he is the one who can try it. And so you don't know what is going ahead of you in the next 2 minutes. Whatever that is going to project in the next 3 hours. Whatever that is in store for the next 1 month. So if you have no clue to what is going on in the next month, looking on to what your savings that you have today tells you that you are not in a good position. But what will happen the next 3 months, you don't know. So why do you now rely upon your instincts? You just start with God, base with God, stand upon God, and let God be the executor. When you build up in that confidence, you are not just becoming a different ordinary man. You become a spiritual man, because your endowment and your whole things is based upon God. So how God tries it? God is trying your heart. It's making to see that whether you are so pure, because there are certain lessons that you have to learn. Learning to rely upon God, based upon, solid on God, branch on God, so that I get up in the morning and I pray. That's another way. But the fact is that absolute reliance on God doesn't mean that whether you are praying or reading. Absolutely reliance on God is faith. You don't care about what you are seeing, but you only put up and you root out that this is what God is going to do. And it is very hard for a businessman, when you have noble ideas and thinking and creativities, and then you sit down and thinking that God is going to help you. Everybody will laugh at you and say that you are not serious. But I tell you, that's where the power is. When you rely upon God, God, I'm going to take this mood. Father, this is where I want to be. This is this course that is it. This is my instinct. And what I wanted to just direct it. God, is this something good for me? Lord, this is. So your dependence is on God, even though you want to take the initiation. And that is exactly what God is bringing to you. That's why you cannot get your ways smoother. And that is how God says that furnace pot is for silver, and the furnace for the gold. But God, but the Lord, trieth the heart. So everything is in your heart. It's God who will try it. If this is what God does, and is specialized in it, I will rather choose to rely upon God than rely upon my instinct, because my heart trial will be justified by God. Verse number 6. Children's children are the crown of old men, and the glory of the children are their fathers. Here is a verse I am sure many of you can appreciate. Children's children are grandchildren. It is a verse of grandfathers. The glory of children are their fathers. Children look like their fathers. I've always been grateful for a daughter who has love and is respected by her father. I've always been grateful, and I see this thing as this is what God really brings out. Always the girls are always on the father's side. We have always been able to communicate, even though she has the same kind of a temper that the child or the father may have. We don't ever let the sun go down in every disagreement. Children's children are the crown of an old man, but only the child resembles the father. So in this sense that you put whatever that you have to, especially how to resolve conflicts. So that means that the Bible is still saying that don't let the sun go down over your anger. Your child will do something, and then 3 days after, the mother is still pouring out a wrath to say that since last 3 days, I've been thinking about it, and I think that you know, sometimes we talk about withdrawal. When a child does something, the first thing that the mother or a father does is that you don't want to talk to the child. We think that that punishment is enough to correct the whole issue. Beloved, as long as you have let sun go down, your anger, you are not in a correction mood. The Bible says that you have to solve that disagreement before the sun goes down. You make sure that if it is 10 times, you talk about it 10 times before the sun goes down. You don't keep out normal. David did it. When Amnon went in and slept with Tamar, David got the message, and David was so angry. But what did David do? David did not talk to Amnon. He just rejected him and just faced him out. He didn't want to see his face until Absalom killed him. You see, the punishment of withdrawal is something of practical and natural. But I tell you, spiritually, it doesn't work. You have to engage. You have to get to the child. Don't withdraw, and use a kind of quietness as a way of speaking unto the child. What have you taught the child for the child to learn from quietness? You've not teach the child anything. You have to engage with the child. Make sure that the child understands what she or he is in. So that he said that as for daddy, anything I do, he's trailing me, he's talking to me, he's doing this. Let the child know your voice in any matter that it is, but don't withdraw and keep silence over the issue and thinking that you can go down overnight. It's not going to work. Because you have used an anger overnight, it will frustrate your prayer. It will never let you come in the presence of God, and your prayer will never be heard by God until you settle the issue with your son or your daughter. Some of you are not talking to your children. This morning, I encourage you, call them and then engage with them. And that will be the solving problem. Verse number 10. A reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. Somebody says, you know, poor this boy or that man. He's a wonderful child of God. And look at the trouble he has had. God reproves his saints sometimes by sending trouble into their lives. God is coaching them because they are wise men. The wise man will listen to reproof. A fool won't listen to reproof. Even if God laid 100 stripes on his back, It wouldn't do him any good. When you see someone prospering who is ungodly, the reason may be that he is such a fool that no matter what God would do to him, he would not change. The Lord Jesus told about a man who took down his old barns to build in a new barn for his crops. He was prosperous and was expanding his business. There is nothing wrong with building a new barn. The thing wrong was that the man was a fool. I didn't say that. Jesus said it. He was a fool because he did nothing about eternity. The chastening of the Lord would not have changed this man. During the Great Tribulation, the world will go through such a intense suffering and judgment that people will gnaw their own tongues. But do not think that they will ever change. Troubles doesn't change a fool, but a trouble will change a wise man. God allows troubles to fall upon the believer, falls upon the man of God, fall upon the one who is raising up and getting up every morning to come on this line and pray. But I tell you, it will change that person for good. But let there be a foolish person, that person will never change. When you see trouble, you see where they run to. When we see trouble, we face it because we know the God that we are. We run into the house of God. We know where to just let God, let this thing melt off. And that is exactly where we are with our time. So when trouble comes, it will just reveal who this person is, whether he's a fool or this person is a wise person. A friend, verse 17, a friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. Did you hear that? This verse reminds of Jonathan, who was such a wonderful friend to David. A friend loveth at all times. Jonathan loved David when he was playing his music in the palace, as well as when he was hiding for his life, trying to escape King Saul. Although Jonathan was the son of Saul and heir to the throne, he loved David. It is a wonderful thing to have a friend like that. If someone doesn't love you at all times, that person is not your friend. So define a friend. The friend is the one who will be there for your adversity. A friend doesn't rather condemn you through when you are going through adversity. Yeah, I told you so. This is what has really come to you. I told you that you should do this and you should do that. The person has really fallen into the pit. And you are trying to correct the whole issue that will never come back. Why do you have to work over the spilled milk on the floor? You can never collect it back and make it so good. It is already gone. All what the person needs is to move forward. But you are bringing the memory onto what you spoke and what you said, and the person did not follow. A friend is born for adversity. So when you are choosing and calling somebody your friend, be very careful. Because there are friends, when trouble comes, they will run and leave you. I've known loyal friends, friends who stuck with, and people will just even be throwing around, why is this person hanging out with this person? A friend is born for adversity. Are you that kind of friend that someone will call you a friend? I'm not talking about your friend, but I'm talking about yourself. Are you a good friend that someone can rely upon you, that you stick with the friend and you will never leave the person in time of adversity? Verse 21, he that begatteth a fool died to his own sorrow, and the father of a fool had no joy. This has been repeated several times in Proverbs. The father of a son who is making good is a father's full joy. he will talk constantly about his boy. If he has a son who is not doing well, he becomes very silent and no one hears about the boy. It's amazing how parenting is all about. When the child is doing good, do you know the one who brags about is the father? When the child is doing very bad, do you know the one who cannot sleep over the child is the mother? When a child is not performing in the home, you go down and you will see from the face of the mother, because the mother is not happy, the father becomes silent and withdraws. But when a child is very good, see, oh, my son has been admitted to one of the Ivy League school and he's doing very well. My daughter is doing this. They'll begin to brag about the achievement of what their children are doing. And you see the father beaming with smile when they see their children doing very well. But you see them very quiet. And even the mother will be very angry and say that, so can't you talk to your son? Don't you know that something wrong is with our son? Then the man will say, what can I do? What can I do? I don't have anything to do. This is what the mothers must know. When the father becomes silent on the son, it is because the son is not performing. And that is the nature of how God wired men. Men will only go with boisterous spirit, telling exactly what their children are doing and performing at everywhere. So any trouble that comes out to a child throughout any kind of forces is the father that has opened up. When a father goes out and tells them, oh, you do know that my daughter is doing her master's program over in this college? Oh, my daughter wants to become a doctor. Oh, my son is becoming an engineer. And then the forces will hear from the father and they will attack the child. Then after the child becomes almost like not making the grade, the father becomes silent. So anytime that the father wants to go out, they want to go out with this kind of notion, my child is doing well. But when the father is not talking about the child, it means that the father is silent and the child is not doing well. Listen to when they are calling for prayer for their children. They will only bring out the ones that they are doing well and hide the ones that they are not doing well in their heart. They will never. But look at the woman who will just say, pray for my son, pray for my daughter. They are not doing well. That's why the mother is really. So you can be a pastor and know exactly what's going on among the children, because the mother is saying pray for this and the father is absent on with that kind of. And that is exactly how we define and we know what parents are doing. Let me go on to verse 23. A wicked man taketh a gift out of the bosom to pervert the ways of judgment. There are many different ways of bribing. And there is so much bribing going on in the world today. We find exactly way how to pervert justice. Sometimes I was listening to one conversation and I was so broken. How these young ladies that we call them beauticians and what we call beauty pageant and all these kind of, how the young ladies can come into the way what they go through to achieve where they are. They have to be sleeping with those that are going to judge them and give them the prominence. And I say, is that what they subject them to? After making them to take all their clothing and become barely naked, you still subject them into sleeping with them before you promote them to become then I don't need this beauty pageant to look unto it. I don't care how beautiful it looks like, because they have to make people sweat and come down. And the confession of someone who became a believer and said, Pastor, what we go through to get to that achievement, you wouldn't believe it. And yet we have people who have also made up their ways that because this job I'm not going to get it, why don't I go sleep with this boss and the boss will give it to me? People are using different ways of bribing. So we pervert justice. We pervert the way of looking clear. And so now finally, verse 28. Even a fool when he holdeth his peace, is counted wise, and he that shutteth his lips is esteemed a man of understanding. The proverb has humor in it. It says that it pays to keep your mouth shut. Folks, when you say he was not at all there, you see, when you begin to think about what is now paying so much is those who are talkative. Everybody wants to become a news anchor and someone who analyzes people's speech. People are running this talk show, that talk show. People are running their mouth from Monday to Sunday, rattling and beaming with all kind of words. But I tell you, say that even a fool, when he holds up his tongue, is considered wise. So you have to learn how to use your tongue and when to be quiet. Not all the time speaking out. This is what will find out and make us to look stupid. Even though we are knowledgeable, we have attained a degree that makes us to become expert in everything. But the Bible is saying that even a fool, when he learns to shut his mouth, is considered. So that means that we have to be at times that there will be issues that you have to respond. But there are times that you have to be quiet and not even to respond. And I tell you, it is really a powerful. How many times have I not seen people attacking? Sometimes their messages to you means that they are attacking as if you are in quarrel and trouble with them. They will attack you to the extent that you have to also react. But that's the best time to prove that you are wise and therefore you become quiet. Beloved, I am telling the men on this line, learn to be quiet. When the issues are really desperate, learn to be quiet. And therefore you will be able to bring out the best out of you. This is what I wanted us to chew on and meditate on so that the grace of God will help us to grow in every knowledge of Him. Even in Jesus' name, Amen.